Good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Policy Committee meeting to order. Evening committee members, and we will move right into our consent. And does anyone have any questions, or maybe Cal, you want to go ahead and go over any of the items on one? Let's just take it one at a time. Anything on the annual self-certification you want to bring to the committee's attention?
No, this is just something we always do annually at the first meeting of the year. Just certifies that our MPO is following all the federal laws and regulations.
Okay. Is there any questions for Kyle? All right. Number 2, Representative Central Iowa Regional Transportation Planning Alliance. Any comments you want to make on that?
Nope.
Questions? Number 3, roadway safety targets. You want to just comment on what those are?
Oh yeah, the roadway safety targets, and I could even go ahead to the next one because they're all kind of related. The PM2 and PM3 targets, they're all performance targets that we, as an MPO, reference when we develop our long-range transportation plans, and they're set by the Iowa DOT. So it's just the MPO setting that it's going to follow the Iowa DOT targets.
Okay. Questions on that?
Just had a general question. The numbers appear to go up into the expected or bridge problems and things like that. Is there a formula or something they're using to get to that?
Yeah, I believe the Iowa DOT basically looks at a baseline of the previous 5 years, and then they have like a process they go through, and then sometimes that might mean that there's a slight increase because based on the last 5 years of data, they try to set a realistic target. So ideally, we would want fatalities to go down, but if the data is showing that that's not realistic, then they'll set a target that's more realistic with the data.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good question. Item 5, transit asset management targets. Barb, thanks for coming. You want to talk about that? Just comment on that?
Oh yeah. So those are targets that SIRIDE sets, and they're basically for all of SIRIDE's fleet and kind of what their goals are for all their baselines. And it's basically the MPO saying we're going to agree with SIRIDE's targets.
Okay. Questions? All right. I would entertain a motion approving consent, which includes items 1 through 5.
Move consent. Second.
Actually, let's get either transit or supervisor.
Second.
All right. Moved by council, second by supervisor. All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. Item number 6. You want to comment on that one?
Yeah. So this is for an amendment request for the Transportation Improvement Program. So just a quick reminder on what the Transportation Improvement Program is. For any transportation project in our region, in order to receive federal funding, it has to be listed in our MPO's Transportation Improvement Program, or it's abbreviated as the TIP. And then the current TIP is for fiscal years 2023 through 2026. And the TIP can be amended in accordance with procedures that are outlined in the TIP document itself, as well as our MPO's public participation plan. And we received a request from SIRIDE to amend the federal aid amounts for a few projects. They are bus purchases for light-duty low-floor buses. And because the federal aid amount increase being requested exceeds 30%, it requires a TIP amendment in order to process. The reason for the federal aid increases are because due to some supply chain shortages with bus manufacturing, the Iowa DOT was basically forced to try to find additional federal funding for all of the statewide existing transit contracts for bus purchases. And these 3 bus purchases as part of this amendment are part of that statewide contract. So in order for SIRIDE to access that new funding that the Iowa DOT has found, we have to process the amendment through the TIP. So that's pretty much the short version of it. What we're looking to do tonight is just to set the date of public hearing for the next policy meeting, which is March 28th, for the approval and the public hearing of the amendment.
Anything you want to add, Barb?
No, I was just here if you had any questions. So.
Okay. Any questions? You're not entertaining a motion setting March 28th, 2023 as date of public hearing regarding amendments to the FFY 2023 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program.
So moved.
Moved by Ludwig, seconded by Merkin.
Yep.
Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. Policy committee comments. Jacob, anything?
Nope.
City council? Supervisor? All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I call the regular city council meeting to order for Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. Welcome, everybody. First of all, welcome Jacob to sit in as our ex officio tonight. Thanks for coming. So you're wearing multiple hats tonight. And council, on our agenda, I am asking, I'm not only asking, just going to pull item number 39, staff report on downtown urban revitalization amendments. That will come back to council in the near future, but there's a little bit of additional work needs to be done on that item. So with that, we're going to move on to item number 1, presentation on headwaters of the South Skunk River Watershed Management Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to introduce to you Sarah Carmichael. Sarah is the Watershed Coordinator for Story County, and she's going to provide for you an overview of the Watershed Management Plan that was recently completed for the headwaters of the South Skunk River. So, Sarah.
Thank you so much. So you can advance the slide. Just a little bit about who I am. So, conservation professional, but I've been with the county for about a year and a half now. But have been working in water quality issues for over 10 years. My main focus right now for the county is our Edge of Field program, working with ag landowners to install best management practices. We also have a volunteer monitoring program throughout the county, and then doing a lot of education and outreach like today. So a quick overview of the presentation. So I'm going to go into what a watershed management authority is. For those that don't know, I'm going to talk about our plan. You can see the long acronym we refer to headwaters, all of those others, talk about why it's important and then who's involved, like yourselves, the city, go through some goals and objectives, and then talk about some next steps. So what exactly is a watershed management authority? It was introduced in legislation in 2010, and it's over the Department of Natural Resources oversees WMAs. This map shows all of our current WMAs in the state, and you can see Story County is a part of 3. The headwaters, Iowa Creek, and 4 Mile Creek in the south. So it's just a way for all entities to kind of form a legal agreement that they will work together, leverage resources, and do what's best for the water and the soil. So cities, counties, soil and water conservation districts, anybody that's interested in being part can join the WMA. It's offered to everybody, all entities, but it is voluntary. There's no taxing or regulatory authority, even though authority is in the name. There's no authority that the group has. Lots of benefits for starting a WMA and implementing a plan, but just looking at efforts on a watershed scale instead of just what's happening, in a small town or city. And of course, fostering partnerships and cooperation, and then leveraging our resources, whether it's in-kind resources or funding resources. So what is the Headwaters and why it's important? So the group started forming in the fall of 2018 before I joined, but I'm part of the technical team of the WMA. We have 9 entities that are members, but the plan for the Headwaters WMA was developed, took over a year, but it was officially adopted by the group in December of last year. 4 counties, 9 incorporated cities, over 210,000 acres, and then 47 miles of the South Skunk is within this watershed. And I guess I should step back and kind of explain what a watershed is. So a watershed is just kind of the area of land where all of the water drains to a certain point, whether that's a ditch, a creek, a stream. And as we zoom out, we get larger and larger watersheds. And what we do in our watershed here is affecting downstream and what's happening in the Mississippi and eventually in the Gulf of Mexico. Sorry, can you go back? Yeah. So the issues that the Headwaters, what this plan is trying to address is our water quality focused on E. coli, nitrate sediment, but also looking at flooding potentially, altered hydrology, and then loss of wildlife habitat. And this map shows the outline of the Headwaters, and those 2 areas that are hashed are actually the priority watersheds that were that the group decided to focus on. The plan looks at all smaller watersheds within this specific area, but those 2 areas are what the data kind of drove our decision to kind of focus our efforts currently. But we are focused on the whole land. So who's involved? So currently there are 9 members. You can see the city of Ames, and Randall, Roland, and Story City. And then the counties, Hamilton and Story, those are the majority of the counties. Of course, it was offered to Boone and Hardin, but they have such a small area that they decided not to get involved with the Headwaters with this WMA. Again, referring to the technical team, there's 13 individuals from nonprofits, co-ops, Iowa State's involved, and then conservation, where I come from. We all provided some guidance on on how the plan came to be. These pictures show the efforts of the group, and then we also offered 2 open houses to introduce the plan to the public before it was officially adopted. That's the upper picture right there. We also have champion farmers. Currently, we don't have any, urban landowners involved, but we're always looking for people that are interested and want to get involved and help guide the efforts of this WMA. So 3 goals were identified, and they each have objectives. I'm not going to read all of this, but it is in the plan. But goal 1 is to make sure that all entities within the WMA are engaged, and we have political, technical, public support to make sure the plan is sustainable. Goal number 2 is to improve the water quality. So that's really focused on the data and driven by the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy that is statewide. So there's goals that we have as a state, and the reason the WMA was formed, and really kind of why my position came to be, was to see what we can do as a county, what we can do on the local level to address these nutrient reduction goals that the state has, because there is no it's all voluntary, and so how can we make a difference at the local level?
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
How many of the members are considered a point source for that nutrient reduction strategy?
Yeah, so the nutrient reduction strategy is both addressing non-point and point sources. So non-point sources would be basically everything that you can think of: agriculture, urban, anything goes down the storm drain. Point sources are coming specifically from like wastewater, where you can actually see, the discharge, or there's regulation involved with it. So regarding the members and wastewater treatment specifically, I believe that would be the city of Ames. I'm not sure if any of the other cities, Roland, Story City, so they have wastewater treatment, so they would be involved with that too. Yeah. And then goal 3. So making sure we're engaging our individual and community commitment. So a lot of education and a lot of outreach for that goal. So strategies, we broke it up into short-term and long-term strategies. We also have an education plan within the plan, but the long-term is really focused, it's 20 years. It's really focused on potential flooding risks, modeling, water quality monitoring. Our short-term, is a 5-year plan. And it really is broken up into an action plan. And that is addressing education, projects and studies, partnerships and policy, monitoring and plan evaluation. And this, each of those has like 5 to 6 different goals that go back to addressing the 3 goals that I previously mentioned. It identifies timelines and who's in charge. So it's a really great action plan for the WMA on what we can do in each of those buckets. And our goal is to get that done in 5 years, but we're constantly meeting and talking through the actions and the objectives. And then next steps on what you can do. So this is my 3rd presentation of 9. So, each city and county and SWCD is going to be different, but kind of this is what I'm thinking that people involved with the WMA can do. So making sure that you all tell us what's important. I know Tim is the representative, and he has been involved with all the meetings and brings forward concerns from the city, but making sure that that continues to happen. Sending representatives to WMA meetings, which is great. February 16th is our next meeting, open to the public as well. And then if you, as a city, have the opportunity to, provide education and outreach to the public through social media or website engagement, we do have our plan online that people can look at. And that would be a great opportunity for the city. Helping identify more champion landowners, whether that's urban or rural, that want to be involved. Always looking for those. And then, of course, we're as we all are, looking for funding opportunities. So right now, the WMA is looking at trying to figure out how to hire a coordinator, or at least hire the ability for the person to help implement projects within the WMA. There's a lot of funding right now for in the ground practices, but not necessarily to fund people. And so what does that look like for the WMA? Is that, all the entities involved in the WMA support it, or is it writing grants to help fund somebody? So that's what the conversation will be happening in February about that. And that will be decided then, but also multiple months out, because it's always a question. So, and that is all I have for you.
Questions? Sarah, I just noted that when your slide says this is voluntary, no taxing or regulatory authority, and our esteemed individual next to you has shared with us many times, how the impact that surface runoff, is really contributing to a lot of the, flooding and or, nitrates, phosphorus. The city is going to be investing tens of millions of dollars to make improvements, to make a very incremental increase or decrease, in our discharge. So are there landowners, farmers that are willing to partner with and work together? I know we're trying to do some some underground, some bioretention, some ways to try and reduce some of that, because we all got to work together on this. But I'm not advocating for regulatory authority, but I'm just like, it almost seems innocuous. I mean, it's like, what's our battle plan here? Education. You can educate all you want. Any thoughts on that? Or are you finding people responding to the education and saying, hey, we can help out, or we're interested in partnering?
Yeah, that's a great question, and always, the question that we battle as a state. But I do know that there are interested landowners. My main focus right now is ag, that are doing work to try to decrease their runoff and decrease their nitrates entering the creek on their land. And I know whatever happens north of here, in the headwaters is really important. And so that's kind of where that person kind of comes in, where my position is coming in, is to try to help facilitate getting that to the landowner. And so it's a process, and we are working on it, and I think we are making great success.
Good.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Any closing comments, John?
No. Appreciate the opportunity to
All right.
share.
Well, thank you for the update. It's a pleasure meeting you, Sarah, and thank you for your efforts. It's really important. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to consent. Council, is there anyone that wants to pull any item from consent tonight?
Mayor, I'd like to pull item 11C.
Okay. Anything else? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent less item 11C.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay. Gloria?
So we got an email about this particular item, and I just wanted to confirm with Chief Huff that that we are comfortable with the amount of scrutiny that's been placed upon Size Roost up to this point.
And Chief, maybe you could give a little more context, for those who may be watching or maybe in the audience not familiar with it.
Yes, I believe you all received an email from an ex-employee of Outlaws Size Roost and maybe another place that he had worked. He had information about Outlaws that I think we discussed in November. The information that he provided to you. He's also provided to the police department. We looked into it. Most of the stuff that he provided was related to Outlaws and not necessarily Size Roost. Other information we're just not able to corroborate. And so in our review, what we found for Size Roost in the last renewal period is what you have before you is they did have 17 underage on-premise citations written at the establishment. However, 13 of those 17 we were able to verify had a fake ID. In addition, that was not on the report, but Size Roost also passed 2 compliance checks in the last 2 years. So there was a March of 21 compliance check that they passed, and then an October of 2022 compliance check that they passed. So at this point, we don't have any information that would lead me to recommend anything other than a renewal. Although I will add, we have put all of our liquor license establishments under closer scrutiny here in the past few months, and we've spent more time in all of our establishments.
I appreciate that. Thank you for filling in the gaps about the compliance checks.
I also did speak to the owner, Andy White, by phone today, and we discussed this too. And so he's aware, and he's continuing. What he told me is he would continue to monitor what was going on at all of his establishments.
Okay. I would move approval.
Second.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
Does that need to be a roll call?
That's a motion. I'll tell you what, if you want, but just be Jake, we'll do roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's a record show, those roll call taken. All right. Move on to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. And I ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. And I see Richard's ready to start out. Richard?
I once wrote this one article pretending to be a future historian. That the idea was that there was a peaceful and loving utopia right here and now, and how did we get from there to like the days of the Holocaust and World War II. It's quite an eye-opener saying there once was a time when people strove for total absolute God Almighty power and feel such power surge through your blood vessels. What do you do with the responsibilities that go with it? And, I talked a little bit about that thing in about the atomic bomb and how they were giving aid to Hitler and made the war in the Pacific go on longer than there had never been an atomic bomb. And they didn't want to be called for what they really are. And Einstein would say, I'm God, when other scientists would present him theories of the universe. And it was their own words that it would have been better for the Nazis to win World War II than for them to make the decisions they were making. They wanted to know what the effects would be on living human tissue. Not that they gave a damn for living human tissue, mind you, but they want nowadays they try to get people to behave like computers and computers to behave like people.
Richard, is this something that the city has any power or has any relates to city business?
It does and it doesn't. I filed a number of Freedom of Information Act requests with a lot of federal agencies to prove their computers are basically safe from computer viruses. And it's like some of the answers I got from some of them a long time ago. It's like, they open up a Pandora's box and they don't know how to solve it. And they talk about the way they talk about, say, the atomic bomb is like Trinity and Trident, and it was like the names of gods. And their ideas of world peace was to have all the world's political, military, and religious leaders experience a nuclear explosion going off in their face.
Richard, can you draw your comments to close, please?
how can we, I mean, you know, it's like I have a sense that it's like I want to improve the national motto. It talks about in God we trust. And you're better than God, so listen to me babble on about God. And it's like I go to churches here in Ames, and they tell me I might be a member for life the first time I go there, but 6 months later they call the police on me and they say to the police I was the reason why people were not going to their churches. It's like you're better than Jesus, you're better than God, you're better than I am. I would tell them. Let's spend a day together, so I
Richard,
could spend a
can you-
day, so I could get to know you, you could get to know me. We could build the world a better place one day at a time.
Richard, I'm going to ask you to stop now, please. Your 3 minutes are up. Thank you. Anybody else that wants to address council?
Yes, hello. I'm a resident here in Ames, and I am here because it's come to my attention since I've been a resident here, and I'm also a master's student and instructor at the university that it's incumbent upon us to do a better job at creating more safety for bikers and pedestrians, especially on campus. This is something that I feel very passionate about, and I'm already getting involved on campus to work on this issue. But to my knowledge, in October, there was an incident that was nearly fatal where a car ran a red light or rather a stop sign and hit a bicyclist. So, this is something that is very important, especially as I said on campus. This did happen on University Boulevard. And since we know that there are certainly other businesses that run in the city of Ames, but one of the biggest attractions in Ames is having a university here, and most university students can't afford to have a car, so you are dependent on a bicycle or a scooter. As an instructor, as I said, I have many students that are on skateboards. So I do think that certainly there's been progress, but I do believe that, especially as we're looking at, transportation funds and capital funds that can help improve safety, a bicyclist should not feel afraid on campus for sure, and as well as it extends across the city of Ames. So I certainly encourage our council members and our representatives to look into this further and work on both the municipal code and the allocation of funding to help our anyone who's not a motorist. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we usually don't respond right away,
Yeah.
but do you want to mention the
Yeah.
bike ped
Yeah.
master plan?
Actually, I have a
process?
number of comments.
Oh, yeah.
First of all is the city has no jurisdiction on any university property. So anything that's on campus, we have absolutely no say on that. We don't invest any money on that. So because you mentioned that several times. Secondly, as Brown was mentioning, we do have a bike ped master plan that we're working on right now. And that will be part and parcel of that, is looking at safety. So I encourage you to check online and offer input on that. And I think I want to encourage you that our capital improvement plan that we're talking about here in the next few weeks does have a lot of improvements to our multimodal, providing alternative means, or also trying to provide designated bike lanes on some of our streets. It takes a long time to do it. I think we're investing about $1.3 million a year to try and improve that. It's really important, but we appreciate your concern. And you're right, we normally don't public. And if you want to add anything, Brown.
Well, I was just going to add, isn't next week our workshop on the bike ped master plan? So it's just good timing. So next week on Tuesday at 6, we're having a workshop here on that bike ped master plan. So you or anyone who else is interested in bicycle and pedestrian topics, that workshop would be good to attend, and there'll be public input at that.
I have to look at the agenda, but for sure it'd be a good time to be brought to speed on it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So just want to mention that's good timing because that's coming up next week.
Thanks for calling. Anyone else?
Andrea Grono, 225 South Kellogg. I felt it drawn to come up and call attention to the point in time count. The annual point in time count for those that are struggling with homelessness will be happening tomorrow afternoon and Thursday morning. So if there is anyone that you know of that is unsheltered and living in conditions unfit for human habitation, there are several locations where they can go to here in Ames. The main point being the library, and pick up a resource bag, and they can be counted so that federal funds can be directed towards our area to help those struggling. So thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Marlene Ersman, 810 Brookridge Avenue. I'm just here to reiterate something I said a couple of weeks ago regarding the Ames Animal Shelter, and I wanted to update the council on some things that have happened. I'm so in favor of moving ahead faster than slower on getting a new Ames Animal Shelter and you all know that it's needed, and the ventilation is abysmal, the spacing is abysmal, the conditions for the animals as well as the staff just are not the quality that we should be expecting here in the city of Ames, because the city of Ames is what I like to call home and a very progressive and enlightened community. So I thank you for all the work that you've done, but this is one place that I really think that really dedicated work needs to move ahead fairly quickly. One thing that has arisen in the last couple of weeks is a die-off of waterfowl on Ada Hayden, and I don't know how many of you are aware of that. And I've been working with the DNR's wildlife veterinarian, Rachel Rudin, on trying to figure out what's been going on. And so I have brought in a group of volunteers from Ada Hayden, Friends of Ada Hayden, as well as the Skunk River paddlers who are trained in ice rescues and water rescues and things. And we've been retrieving, when we can, we've tried to retrieve live animals, like a couple of immature trumpeter swans have gotten sick. We retrieved them too late. They had both recently died. And then over 40 Canada geese and a couple of mallards. And those, then with the City of Ames Animal Control, they've been awesome in helping with the disposing of the carcasses, those animals that aren't going to be tested, and the ones that are going to be tested, then they transfer on to ISU Veterinary Diagnostic Lab for further testing. And those tests are ongoing. We're starting to hear that things are now being discovered, and some of the carcasses have been passed on to the Animal Disease Lab for further testing. So there's a lot going on, and to have I want to see that the Ames Animal Shelter, our staff, for one thing, are well cared for, because what they do for this community is just boundless. And that emotional drain that they have to take on daily, whether it's cats and, well, we all know what some of the situations have been going on lately with cats and hoarding situations. But I know with my work with the Iowa Wildlife Center, it's everything we do is really pretty emotionally draining. And unless you're in the middle of that, you can't know what your surroundings do to help you or hinder you. And so just taking care of that staff is really crucial for me here in the city of Ames to allow me to do my work. So I really want to impress upon you the seriousness of getting that facility upgraded to what it should be, and to have it be a source of pride for our community, and let them do their work in the situation that they definitely desperately need. So I have no other comments. If you have any questions about any of that, I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks very much.
Hi, my name is Will Dieterman. I'm from 1008 Lincoln Way. Okay, so today I'd like to talk about the South Grand Extension. But more specifically, I want to talk about a small section of this extension from South 4th Street to South 5th Street. The extension has been in place for over a year now, and since I use it daily, and I have noticed some issues with this section of the road. Before I begin with the bad, I'd also like to mention that as a whole, the extension has been a big benefit to the community, giving people a much needed connection from one part of Ames to another. As I said before, I use it daily, and for the most part, I don't have too many issues with the vast majority of the extension. As a driver, you may have never noticed any problems with this section of the extension. That's because the problem doesn't affect drivers all that much. It mainly has to do with the lack of safe options to cross the street of South Grand Avenue. Before we can figure out why this is a problem, first it's important to ask why people need to cross the road. On the east side of this section of South Grand is a large neighborhood of high-density apartment buildings. On the west side of this section is a large multi-use path. If you are not traveling by car, this path is generally preferred for being wider and more accessible. It also leads to a trail that goes through a wooded area. If you want to walk through a beautiful natural area that's close to your home, this is likely the best option for many people in this area. The other reason is for general transit. The west multi-use path is better if you plan on going south on South 16th Street or just to get to South Ames at all. Currently, there is only one safe crossing in this section, that being the stoplight on South 4th Street. Unfortunately, that crossing is hard to get to from most of the apartments and requires backtracking if you plan on going south. The other crossing is on either side of South 5th Street. They do not have stoplights, so pedestrians are supposed to watch out for traffic and cross when it is safe. I think in theory, that was the initial idea, but in practice, this is not a viable option for two reasons. One, the South Grand extension is unnecessarily wide. This is for a couple of different reasons, but mainly due to the addition of a turning lane to make it easier for cars. When you look at this road on a map, it may not seem like much of a distance. It can be difficult to notice how wide a road really is until you walk across it in person. And you have to keep in mind that that distance you personally didn't have any issue with might be incredibly undertaking for someone who is handicapped or elderly. Not only that, but when you make a road wider, people will tend to drive faster as a result. People will go whatever speed they feel is right for the road, regardless of the posted speed limit. If you make your roads wide and then are confused as to why so many people are speeding, you may want to rethink how you design the roads in the first place. And two, you created one of the most popular commuter routes. I can't stress this enough. I'm not sure if this was known beforehand, but currently the South Grand extension is immensely popular for people driving to and from work. This combination of issues results in cars constantly passing a very wide road, many of them speeding. This is obviously problematic for any pedestrian wanting to cross the street safely. What people usually end up doing to cross the street is they cross the road by Squaw Creek Drive. Which is in between South 4th Street and South 5th Street. There is actually a median in the middle of the road there, meaning most people have to run to the median, step up onto it, stop, wait for traffic, then run across. For solutions, if I'm being honest, I'm not entirely sure what the best course of action is. It seems to me that there should be a safe crossing at Squaw Creek Drive. The reason people choose this already, even though it is unsafe, is that it's the closest and the most central option for many people living in the apartments. In fact, before this extension was added, there was a crosswalk at Squaw Creek Drive, but it has since been removed. Oftentimes, you'll find, even if there is a somewhat safe option some distance away, people will choose the shorter option, even if it isn't as safe. It's better practice to make the shortest option also the safest option. It may be a hard pill to swallow that as a city we made a crosswalk, got rid of said crosswalk, and now I'm asking to remake that crosswalk. But to some, that might seem like we can't make up our minds, but I believe that being open to change is a big part of good city design. The actual problem is there is currently a median running across the road. If the median were to be removed or reshaped to allow a crosswalk and crossing lights added, I think it would probably be the better, cheapest solution. Another option that isn't ideal but would be better than nothing would be to add crossing lights at South 5th Street. Even better would be to add a stoplight in this intersection. The best option, in my opinion, would be to add a raised crosswalk. These are extremely helpful for two reasons. They are easier for pedestrians to cross since they don't need to step down onto street level. And they also act as a small speed bump for cars, which naturally makes them drive slower. I believe that there are many crosswalks in Ames that would massively benefit from a raised crosswalk. That being said, this doesn't entirely fix the issue. It may be the best option, but I believe that we can use this as a learning experience for next time. This problem of not being able to cross the street is not an isolated issue. There are many streets that don't feel safe to cross in Ames, and not just ones that were designed 30 years ago. This is a problem even with new road infrastructure. The current idea is we'll make big paths and sidewalks for pedestrians and big wide roads for cars. Everyone wins. And while this thought process may seem flawless on paper, in real life, it's not that simple. If you really want to push accessibility to all and promote walkability to residents, then that means sometimes sacrificing minor conveniences for cars to give pedestrians a single safe option. That especially means you need to stop and ask if a road truly needs to be as wide as it is. That means that you need to critically think about where pedestrian traffic is coming from and how they can get from point A to point B safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Did we get his contact information?
Mhm.
Would you mind filling out a orange card and leaving it with just here on this table up here so we can get in contact with you if we need to? Thank you. All right. We'll close public forum and we'll move on to item number 34, resolution approving 2022 accomplishments of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Good evening, City Council. I have with me tonight the chair of the HPC, Susan Minks. So she's here to represent the commission and be able to answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to introduce the item. We have an annual report that we send to the state. We're a certified local government, which gives us some access to state funds and programs, but it also comes with obligations to promote historic preservation, to have an active historic preservation commission. And so we have an annual report to describe what has been done in the past, but also very importantly to describe what the HPC is seeing as their interests going into 2023. So for the most part, we're usually focused at this meeting on what's coming up for 2023. So we've gone through in the report that's attached to describe the activities that have been done by the HPC, and then also what is proposed for next year. And as we noted, a lot of it is to work in terms of outreach to Old Town to consider maybe language or updates for Chapter 31 as they're working through that as a commission, to potentially look at resource surveys or to look at nominations if that was to come up from an existing neighborhood. None of those things have been identified as being a budget issue, so we haven't really come forward with any financial requests. And through the budget process, we have a budget for HPC of $2,000. That's what we would rely upon for those educational activities and the training activities that go for training of the commissioners for the most part. So Susan's also here to fill in anything that I left out or specific questions that you might have for the HPC.
I don't know if this is something you can answer or not, Susan. How many of the HPC members are actually doing training and attending? I know that the Preserve Iowa Summit was listed in there, but is it the whole commission? Is it just a few?
I think the whole commission has an opportunity, and the Preserve Iowa, a lot of it is available online, or was this last year. I don't know if they're going to continue this next one, but that is an opportunity that all of the commission members have. Those who, because some of them work as well as do other things, I think we have two members this past year who were able to actually go up to Mason City, was where the meeting was this year.
Other questions? All right. Well, on behalf of City Council, thank you for your efforts and your hard work. Every one of our boards and commissions. And I'll put in a shameless plug. We need people to be applying for boards and commissions every year, and that application time is right now. And we have several openings on historic preservation too. So thank you for your efforts and your leadership. And I would entertain a motion to approve the 2022 accomplishments of the Historic Preservation Commission and work plan for 2023 as described in the 2022 Certified Local Government Report.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you for coming and your efforts. Appreciate it. All right, we're gonna move on to item number 35. This is a 2023 to 2028 capital improvement plan. Do you have any comments you want to make, Steve? or-
I don't believe so. We just wanted to give an opportunity for people to give us feedback based on the presentation the department heads gave last week. Final decisions will be made by the council at your budget wrap-up session on February 14th. So there's plenty of time to receive feedback from the public.
Hi, Corey, Linda. Any comments from you?
Nope, we're just looking forward to comments this evening.
All right. All right, the microphone is open. Is anyone that wants to address council on the capital improvement plan that was presented last week? I think that was duly noted due to your eloquent inputs and also Will's comments also regarding the crosswalk as well. Good. All right.
I might want to mention that Steve Martin sent an email to the city council or to a few members of the council, I think, or maybe all the council members. He couldn't be here today. He wanted to make sure I passed it along to you. So we have that for the record.
Yep. All right. Well, we will go ahead and close public input. Thank you. And we will move on to item number 36. Resolution approving home investment partnership, ARPA, proposed allocation projects.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is our conclusion from our receiving our public input provider sessions that we conducted these last couple of weeks. A part of this opera grant requires us to reach out to stakeholders and to public to get their input about how to use the ARP funds. And what's outlined into doing that is HUD breaks down the opera funds into basically two categories. And one is that they identify who the qualifying populations are for the program. And that would be homeless individuals and families, those at risk of homelessness, those fleeing or attempting to flee from domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. And then other populations that would be greatest risk of having housing instability, including veterans and their families. And then they also identified areas where we can use those funds to address those populations. And that would be under the production or preservation of affordable rental housing only, tenant-based rental assistance, supportive services, and then the purchase or development of non-congregate shelters for individuals and families experiencing homelessness. And so the funds has also been set aside that a certain percent of it can be used if we had a community housing development organization, CHODOs, which we don't currently have any eligible CHODOs in Ames at this time. And 5% can be used to help fund the capacity building of some organizations where needed. And then 15% of the funds can be used for planning and administration. And HUD has been very, very detailed about these regulations and how entitlement or PJs can go about soliciting that feedback. And they recently changed, didn't change, they specified that the plan has to be submitted by March 31st in order for us to be able to receive the funding, which kind of put the whole country in a tailspin because we just found that out at the end of November. But anyway, and they also laid out that the funds have to be expended by September 30th of 2030. And then again, we must conduct stakeholder consultations and feedback. And so we did 3 stakeholder consultations and feedback. We held them at the library, one on January 9th, specifically for providers and stakeholders, and then 2 opportunities on Thursday, January 12th, to the general public and whoever else would want to attend. We reached out to several groups, not only from our asset list, but from other organizations throughout the community. We sent letters, we sent postcards, and then we also sent emails to all of those agencies. We also did an online survey that was available on our website that was for both stakeholders and providers, and also for the general public to fill out. And so while we were at the public forum, we kind of did an overview of the program, just like I'm doing with you tonight. And one of the things HUD really wants to know and get feedback was, how do you want to rank the qualifying populations? What do you think is the greatest need for the use of funding? And so when we held those, we got, after you take off the administrative cost, you're down to about 1.1, just over $1 million, which is not a lot of money, but it's still going to benefit our community. But when you kind of get it down the pipe, that's what we're dealing with. And so as we did the feedback, when we did the public forums, the top qualifying populations came up as those experienced homelessness, sheltered and unsheltered, and then that of supportive services, which means doing services like legal, job training, mental health services, etc. And then the top eligible activities were non-congregate shelters, the production of affordable rental housing, and number 3 was supportive services. And then, as you can see, the feedback from the general public, the top qualifying populations were, again, those experiencing homelessness and individuals at risk of homelessness, and then persons fleeing domestic violence or attempting to flee violence. And then the top eligible activities were, again, non-congregate shelters. It was a split between the production of affordable rental housing and tenant-based rental assistance and supportive services. And then the feedback that we got from the online public feedback was we had about 61 participants, 55 were public and 6 were stakeholders. And then the top activities, we asked them kind of a different question on the online survey. We asked them what the top eligible activities they thought the funds should be used for. And that was number 1 was production and preservation of affordable rental housing. TBRA was number 2, non-congregate shelter was number 3, and supportive services was number 4. And then we also asked them what they felt their top 5 supportive services were. And number 1 was mental health, childcare was number 2, employment assistance and job training was 3, housing search assistance and counseling was number 4, and number 5 had a tie between food assistance, case management, transportation, and life skill training. So again, we tried to offer a lot of opportunities for feedback. And then from the stakeholders online, the number 1 eligible activity was non-congregate shelter. Number 2 was the production and preservation of affordable rental housing. And number 3 was tenant-based rental assistance. So based on those feedbacks, you can see that the qualifying populations seem to be those for homeless populations and those at risk of homeless. And then the primary activities was non-congregate shelter, production and preservation of affordable rental housing, tenant-based rental assistance, and supportive services were next in priorities. So after reviewing all the data in our current 2019 to 23 consolidated plan, we looked at our most current projects that we've been doing since 2021 through today, and feedback from the asset team. Staff believes that home ARC should be used to address the following: for the qualifying populations, homeless individuals and families at risk of homelessness, and then persons fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating, violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And staff feels like the number 1 eligible activity should be that of non-congregate shelter, both for homeless individuals and families, and also those fleeing violence, because they need to be separated out and they couldn't all be in the same congregate shelter. So that's why there's two particular congregate shelters. And our rationale for that is that based on our goals, meeting the needs of homelessness or people at risk of homelessness is in our consolidated plan. And we're currently using our home allocation out at the Baker subdivision to develop the low-income affordable rental housing units. And then in the near future, when we get our next round of home funds, we certainly can, council can decide to direct us to use that to create a tenant-based rental assistance program for needy families at the very low income level. And then again, the use of these one-time funds for capital improvements. We feel that the operating costs, there would be a challenging, because HUD says if you're going to use it for supportive services and so forth, you have to find a way to show that what happens when the funding stops. How are you going to continue to make that happen? So that would be a concern for doing any type of supportive services. And we also have asset at this time that does a lot of funding in our community for supportive services, and we would not want to kind of do a duplication of benefits. Also, we felt that these two would meet HUD's requirements to focus on brick and mortar type of activities and using our expertise and our experience to get the funds spent in a timely manner. So at this point, we outlined on attachment A of your action form that we would use the funds for non-congregate shelter, which we could acquire, demolish, or rehab, and that would take up just over the $1 million, and then the remaining $190,000 would be for our general administration that would match the $1.269248 that we received in ARP funds. Any questions?
I have a question, but I'm not sure that we have a good answer for it. That's right. Pull yourself up. So we've got a little over $1 million, and you noted that that doesn't go all that far, really, in the big scheme of things. So what are we going to be able to accomplish for bricks and mortar projects with that amount of money that isn't going to require additional investment in operating the shelters or shelter properties?
Okay. Well, the brick and mortar would be when we can buy something that's already here that can be rehabbed, that can help spend it quicker. Or if we have a vacant lot, that's something that we can be built that's not really substantial, but can kind of meet the need, or things like that, then that quickly can help us spend the money quicker. And then as far as what happens, who's going to administer it, that would be working with the asset group who already have funding for those kind of things, and leveraging the money that the council already has put aside for doing that, and kind of adjusting that as we add the congregate shelters. And some of the agencies that may be doing that now maybe need that expansion, but just didn't have the capacity to expand it, but have the resources to administer it.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, well, public input. I have one card from Loris. You're welcome to address council.
Loris Olson, 1705 Buchanan Drive, Ames, Iowa, president of Home Allies. And I think you kind of know what I'm going to say here, okay, is that this entire chunk of money is being allocated to likely one agency for their project of expansion. To make certain, I want to clarify, because I was a little unclear what Vanessa said, the city's not looking at building anything. The city is going to give it to one or more entities to build. Okay. I find myself in a very difficult position here because I've worked very closely with, I believe, the agency that some city staff wants to give all the money to. And I support that agency. Okay. And we desperately need non-congregate temporary housing, shelter housing. But what do you do after the people are done qualifying for shelter housing? That's short-term housing. So I'm here to ask that you support number 2, which is the recommendation with modifications. And I'm here to ask that you look at giving, say, 80% of it to the non-congregate shelter proposals that might come in, and 20% of it to try and actually get some long-term housing built. And yes, I'm only aware of one project in town right now that's ready to break ground as soon as the gap between what the lender says they'll give and what we've collected already in other grants and in cash, and then what is in fact needed given to all of the increase in costs. And so I'm asking you for a modification of, say, 80% to still go to the non-congregate shelters. We need them. There's no question about it. But let's go ahead and do some long-term housing that is desperately needed for exactly the population. The Home Allies project is all created for the people that are in the definition, both A or B or 1 or 2, I can't remember which, okay, that says about at risk of homelessness or homeless or maybe fleeing or being stalked. I mean, those are all people that are high risk that the whole Home Allies was designed for. It's only 8 units, but it's 8 units that'll be there for 30 to 50 years. Okay. And so that's what I'm asking you tonight is that to take a look at what can you do now. I know staff pointed out about the Baker subdivision, okay, and where you're headed now. I assume that's the project you're talking about, right? The 9% tax credits. But do you have that yet? You don't even have it awarded yet. And so that's 2 or 3 years down the road if everything goes to the schedule. Whereas here, you could provide some housing by fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address council on this topic? All right, we'll close public input. Any further questions for staff or discussion?
Maybe Vanessa, if you could, I'm sensitive to time tonight, but I think maybe Loris has raised some interesting issues. Are there any points of response that you think would be helpful for us to hear as we try to balance these competing needs in the community?
Certainly, I guess I would like to clarify that we have not decided who would get this funding.
Right.
These are just the feedback and what we felt from the feedback and our own data. The need was congregate housing. Doesn't mean the city wouldn't be doing the project itself because we can. We didn't say we're going to give it to anyone at this point. This is certainly something that we could administer ourselves. We haven't got to that point because we haven't submitted the application to HUD to make sure it's going to get approved. And if it is approved, then and the council directs us to go out for RFPs or take applications for these particular program, then that's what we'll do. But it's certainly something that the city is capable of doing itself as well.
Other questions? Once the allocation is set, that can or cannot be changed. If 100% was option 1 says 100% goes to your acquisition, demolition, rehabilitation of non-congregate housing, can that be modified in the future if there's
I'm not sure at this point, Mayor. I know, like with our regular CDBG program, we do have some flexibility under a certain cap to make a change. And if we wanted to go over that cap, then we'd have to go back out and do a public input. And that might be the same under home ARP. Like, okay, we get down the road. Okay, we're not going to spend it all on congregate shelter. Can we go back and revise our plan? I will find out. But if it's similar to our CDBG, then yes, we can. But we have to go back out for public comment before we can submit an amended plan.
And I'm not proposing that that be done. I was just curious.
Yes, I think they do allow you some latitude with that if you go back out for feedback.
Thank you.
Can you also tell us about the kinds of agencies you can partner with in terms of any certifications or requirements that they would need to meet, or is it too early? Is that not part of the requirements at this point? At this point, you're just going after the funding, and then you would be
At this
worrying
point,
about
we're just
those.
trying to meet the deadline to
Okay.
get our allocation plan submitted and approved, and then go and come back and have you decide, is it something that you like us to pursue as a staff to get this done, or you would rather for us to go out and solicit for partners to get it done?
Okay, thank you.
All right. There's no further discussion. I would entertain council making a motion.
I would move alternative 1.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If you want to just summarize in brief what it is for anyone who may be watching or audience.
Yeah, that we're approving this proposal, directing staff to prepare a draft allocation plan, and setting March 28th, 2023 as the date of public hearing for approval of submitting the plan to HUD so that it can be done by March 31st, 2023.
And the proposed allocation would be as shown on attachment A.
Yes, exactly. That 1,269,248.
Yep. All right. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 37, resolution setting February 14th, 2023 as a date of public hearing for sale of lots 2 through 8 in the Baker subdivision, Habitat for Humanity of Central Iowa.
Yes, now that we've completed all of the infrastructure this past summer, we're ready to start with some housing. And, the CDBG program and the home dollars that we're using out there require that 51% of the lots for single family have to be affordable housing. So we're doing 26 lots in the subdivision. So 14 of those lots have to be affordable to very low income families. And the city has been partnering over the years with Habitat to address getting the need to affordability. And we've been talking with Habitat, and they have received some also OP funds to build housing for first-time low-income home buyers. And we're looking at seven of those lots to be given to Habitat to start our subdivision. Habitat has made some adjustments in their income guidelines. They're now going to go up to the full 80% of which we would do for a home program. So that gives us a way to partner some of our families that come to us through Habitat for these houses that they're looking to construct as part of their grant. They're also possibly looking to construct 1 or 2 just out of their own funds, separate from the ones that they get from their own state OP funds. And so we looked at those lots on the south side of Wilmouth to start the kickoff of building the housing. And we will be finalizing the terms and conditions of those lots and when they should be built. We've been talking about starting at least 3 this summer, 3 the next summer, and that's what Habitat has been talking about. And again, we'll be finalizing those details and bringing those guidelines back to you at the public hearing on February the 14th.
Questions? Vanessa, your attachment A was highlighting lots 3 through 8. So it will be lot 2 through 8. Is that correct?
Yes, we made an adjustment because just like with the home ARP money that we're dealing with and the guidelines and when things turn over, Habitat is concerned that maybe they can get started with their own funding. If their funding for the ARP gets delayed, then they won't get delayed in getting at least a house started.
Okay. All right. We'll open up public comment. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic tonight? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Any further discussion? Entertain a motion setting February 14th, 2023 as a date of public hearing for the sale of lots 2 through 8 in the Baker subdivision to Habitat for Humanity of Central Iowa.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Abstain, conflict?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. All right, moving on to item number 38, staff report relating to minimum floor area ratios for downtown non-conforming structures.
Good evening. We gave a lot of background on how we got to tonight for this particular property downtown, but the issue that we're talking about it in general is how do we expect remodeling of buildings downtown to progress with our current zoning requirements and our current expectations that new projects meet a 1.0 floor area ratio requirement, which is that ratio of building area to lot area. In this particular case for Mr. Nelson, he had decided to proceed with doing an addition to his building, which was also related to merging multiple parcels to allow for that building addition to happen. In this case, he's decided he would like to not do that addition project, which has put him into a situation where with zoning compliance, it was tied together between your site plan approval and your lot merger. So if city council is interested in trying to allow for remodeling, but not in any way impact how new construction is done, we've presented 2 options for you. One of those choices would be to allow for lot mergers without having to consider what the calculated floor area ratio is. So what that would mean is if I owned a parcel with one building and I owned another vacant parcel next door, I could merge those even though my calculated floor area ratio would drop because I increased land area, but my building area did not increase. Currently, we would not allow that unless you were also doing an addition or you were maintaining consistency with your current floor area ratio. So if you allow for that, in this case, it would then allow for the lots to stay configured as they are, but the building would still be considered non-conforming because it doesn't meet the overall floor area. We have limitations on remodeling already for non-conforming structures. They're universal across the city. That would apply in this case, and you can re-tenant buildings, you can rehab the interior of buildings, but you can't go so far as to completely alter the structural components of a building under that remodeling definition. So in this case, it would help Mr. Nelson because he does want to re-tenant the spaces. He has some internal configurations he would alter. For the most part, it seems like he would be able to meet our remodeling definitions if he was not encumbered by having to do a building addition to meet our overall zoning standards. The second option that we described, and I want to make clear, we described one as option 1 and one as option B. There's really just option 1 and option 2, not a 1B and a 1C or anything along those lines. So option 2 is to really think about it in a different way, that we would keep our floor area ratio requirements intact. We would expect all development, even lot mergers, to be consistent with that standard, but we would change how we review long-term conformance for a project that is essentially phased, where they have the intent of doing an addition. You would go through the effort of getting a site plan approved that shows how you would meet zoning standards, and we would expect you to progress towards doing that addition. We would issue permits in line with that approval. But if, however, you were not able to complete the addition, then you would not have the penalty that's currently in the municipal code, which is a financial penalty for not completing a project consistent with the zoning ordinance. So it's a way to maintain zoning integrity with what we expect for all projects, but it allows a little bit of an out for someone that intends to do an addition, but may not be able to complete it in the manner that they first anticipated and not be held at a financial disadvantage by the city for that. The hook would be that future building permits would not be issued if you didn't complete the addition. So ultimately, let's say it's 5 years from now, you could re-tenant the building, you could remodel interior work, you could get trade permits, but we would never issue a building permit that altered the building in a way that didn't further that future addition. So those are the two options that we could come up with in response to Mr. Nelson's request. It's kind of a tricky issue because we all have reinforced over time that the floor area ratio, the two-story requirements downtown seem to be important. They define the character of Main Street for us and that core area of downtown. And we really want to emphasize that's valuable to the city. So trying to understand how you might grant a little bit of latitude without creating a situation where you're undermining your goals in the long term. That's really the trick that we're at tonight, if that's something that we want to continue to look at.
Questions? Kelly, would there's no chance that if option one were approved, that it would all of a sudden fall underneath the option two, that they would, I mean, I'm not sure what they fall under the zoning ordinance procedure and enforcement, that they would be still out of compliance and still have to move forward, or that only is triggered when they go through the plan itself and get the site plan approved?
Under option one, the act of changing your lot configuration would be legally allowed under zoning. So you would not be creating a conflict in terms of lot configuration. Okay. What it would do is make your building, either your building would stay non-conforming or it would become non-conforming, which would be intentionally allowed. And then that would put those remodeling restrictions on you if you didn't already have those. So you'd be making a choice to do that, and maybe to your advantage, but you are going to inherit a little bit of non-conforming status if you were to go through that. But it would be more flexible than the current options available.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Kelly, are there any negative consequences for the city that we should be thinking about with option one?
I think, though, it's a little abstract to think about, but it's that issue of every time we do something that might prolong the life of a non-conforming structure or site or building, that's a trade-off of granting flexibility to somebody. So are we artificially extending the life of something that we believe should be redeveloped, or a more substantial reinvestment would be desirable over time by giving somebody that latitude of having property flexibility? It's really hard to say for sure that would happen. It's possible. If we go down this route of changing something, we might want to put some clarifications into the downtown zoning. For example, I think we had a question of, well, if I merge lots, could I build a parking lot on a vacant lot? I don't think you can under the standards, but it doesn't expressly state that either. So there's some issues where maybe we want to clean up how the downtown zoning and how readily understandable it is, because it gets a little bit complicated when you start to create non-conforming situations. But it's a little hard to say absolutely yes, but there is potentially maybe in some abstract way that could happen.
Yeah, a lot of this feels very abstract. So I'm always trying to anticipate the law of unintended consequences. So do you have a sense of the number of other properties, and this is just your best estimate, that would be impacted if we went with option one?
So that would mean people that own more than one property and they abut each other, where they might take advantage of merging them. That's really the only people that would be affected by that. There's a handful off the top of my head. So less than five situations, maybe 3 situations that are probably able to take advantage of that under current ownership situations.
Thanks.
Kelly, if we were to approve option one, would this project that was approved originally be able to be completed at some point in the future?
I think option one does not impair their ability to execute the approved plan. It clearly doesn't, because it allows for the conditions that exist today to be legal. And they went down this path thinking they were going to do an addition and become in more compliance with DSC zoning. So it does not inhibit what they were originally planning.
Sort of an interesting situation. I mean, people's construction plans change. We, as a city, we change our plans. And so it's sort of a difficult spot for the developer in this situation.
All right. Open up public comment. Does anyone want to address the council on this? Seeing none, we'll close public input. Any closing comments or discussion?
So I would throw out that we have as a goal to see development in our downtown. We appreciate when a local developer makes these kinds of investments. It's not that I favor a local developer over an out-of-state developer, but I think there's some advantages in terms of a sensitivity to the values of our community. And so I like to try to find ways to say yes to reasonable requests. I feel like I've asked questions to help us understand the possible negative consequences, unintended consequences. So I'm going to go ahead and move option one. I think it's a reasonable request.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you, Kelly. We're going to move on to item number 40. As I mentioned at the onset, I pulled item number 39. Have you noticed discussion at this time on that? So item 40 is hearing on a zoning text amendment for front yard parking and driveway standards. And it's been requested by staff that we move to continue that hearing until February 28th, 2023.
Move to continue the hearing.
Second.
All right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say sign. All right. Item 41, hearing on rezoning of planned unit development with master plan for 3216 Tripp Street, Baker subdivision, lot 27, from residential low density to residential medium density with a PUD overlay and master plan.
So we are the applicant as the city. I think we identified pretty clearly in seeking our LIHTC partner, we have to have a site that's ready to go to meet state standards. So what you're really approving tonight is to change from the RL low density to a medium density designation, but then you're adding an overlay that puts controls back on the property. So attachment C in your report is the quote master plan, and it doesn't have building plans in it. Those will have to come back to you for approval once we have a partner developer. But what we are setting tonight is that density limit of 30 to 50 units. We're acknowledging that it's going to be affordable housing, so a parking reduction can be approved in the PUD. And really, in essence, what we're looking at here is how to set ourselves up for the project that we've been talking about for years to move forward. We knew we'd be doing this at some date. We're just doing it now to make sure that we're ready to go. It was an interesting exercise. I don't know if you spent time looking at that, but from Ames Plan 2040 perspective, we spent some time trying to understand, are we really amending the plan in a sense that we need to go back and change Plan 2040, or do our land use designations that we wrote, which are designed to allow for some flexibility for infill, in totality, are we meeting the intent of Plan 2040? So we spent some time trying to explain how doing an affordable housing project that requires a change of density can be viewed in its totality as complying with the plan. And it's not just that one land use designation on its own that really controls everything. So it's that idea of context and total goals that need to be looked at for this. And that's why we could support the rezoning without having to consider an amendment to the plan. Now, This is unique. We're within a development project that the city is doing. It's not in the middle of a neighborhood. It's on the edge of a neighborhood. We have built-in buffers to make this work. So we felt like that was a real strong justification to be this unique approach that might not be repeated, but it really worked well for what we're trying to do in this location.
Questions? If not, declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this item? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed and entertain a motion on first passage of ordinance.
Move on first.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 42, hearing on amendment to contract rezoning agreement for 798 North 500th Avenue, North Sunset Ridge.
Right. So we have a little bit of a unique situation here. So we advertised amendments to a rezoning agreement related to the development of a future subdivision called North Sunset Ridge. As part of that, there's two components to this rezoning agreement. One where the city negotiated the cost sharing related to a sanitary sewer trunk line extension. And then secondly, there's a standard master plan component that went into rezoning the property. So both of those items required a public hearing, but under different code requirements before they could be approved. Unfortunately, we were unable to have a quorum for a planning and zoning commission meeting last week. They must make a recommendation regarding the rezoning master plan component. So you'll see on the agenda, you are unable to act on the master plan change. So the motion tonight should be to table that item. Once we have a planning and zoning commission recommendation, we will renotice and come back for the master plan amendment. The other item related to the substitution of financial security for the sanitary sewer, it is not required to have a planning and zoning commission recommendation. So you can consider this request tonight. So that's item B on the 42B on the agenda. In this case, we had a unique situation again that we negotiated an agreement for a fixed amount as a contribution towards a city project. The terms were to give the city the cash within 2 weeks of award of the contract. You awarded the contract on January 10th, so it would have been due to the city today. As the developer was looking at the amendments to the agreement, they asked if there was a possibility of substituting the letter of credit. So in this situation, staff looked at this. It's a bit different than our normal practices. It's not how we typically do things when there's a fixed amount. We usually take the cash, we put it in an account, we accrue interest, and we use that in the future date whenever we have a project. In this case, for this short amount of time, there's no risk to the city of cost inflation. So it seems like it can fit to do this cash security as a substitute with a letter of credit. We have a signed agreement returned to us. We noted we were working on that on Friday. Legal has reviewed the letter of credit per form, but we do have to let you know that the bank can't deliver that to us until tomorrow at the earliest. So if you do approve the amendment, it's really contingent on receiving that letter of credit based on your action tonight. So if you do vote to approve this, you are holding that amendment for a short amount of time, awaiting for that letter of credit to arrive. Do you have any questions about either of those items? So we are saying to open the public hearing, which I think you did, Mayor,
Yep.
And we will close it versus many times you just say continue the hearing to a later date.
All right. Declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on either revised on the resolution to change for the letter of credit or on the revised master plan? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion to table the resolution approving the revised master plan.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and entertain a motion on resolution approving a change to allow for acceptance of a letter of credit in the amount of $604,725 in lieu of cash security until March 31st, 2023, contingent upon receipt of said letter of credit.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moving and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Good to go? All right, thank you. All right. We're going to move on to item number 43, public hearing on the 2021-2022 concrete pavement improvements, Stang and 24th Street. I declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this project? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Entertain motion on resolution approving final plans and specifications and awarding the contract to Construct Incorporated of Ames, Iowa, in the amount of $4,252,314.23.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And on item number 44, I declare the public hearing on the 2022-2023 downtown street pavement improvements on the alley on 5th and 6th Street between Duff Avenue and Douglas Avenue. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this project? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids.
Maybe he's up.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Entertain motion on resolution approving final plans, specifications, and awarding the contract to Brothers Concrete of Des Moines, Iowa, in the amount of $103,062.30.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. On item number 45, declare the public hearing on the 2022-2023 Fire Station Number 3 Portland Cement Concrete Replacement to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this item? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Entertain motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding contract to Brothers Concrete of Des Moines, Iowa, in the amount of $228,269.50.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And item number 46, I declare the public hearing on the 2022-2023 Seal Coat Pavement Improvements and Neighborhood Curb Program Project, Murray Drive to Northwestern Avenue to Grand Avenue, to be open. Does anyone want to address council on this topic? Seeing none, hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. And entertain a motion on resolution approving final plans, specifications, and awarding the contract to Manass Inc. of Ames, Iowa, in the amount of $722,863.45.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 And move on to item number 47. Zoning text amendment to amend the home occupation regulations. Mark?
Yes, you did first passage at the last meeting, and then afterwards, Jane in my office was looking at the ZBA section of the code and noticed a reference to home occupation permits, which are, no longer going to be there. And so then she did some more looking, and there were actually 14 tables in the zoning ordinance that included references to home occupation permits, and then 3 places in the ZBA section of the code. So we've provided you with a draft ordinance, and it includes the language that was approved last time, plus all the other references that need to be struck. And so first we need a motion to amend the ordinance consistent with the draft that's in the packet. And then you could vote on second passage.
Any questions? All right, I want to open up public comment on the proposed changes. Is there anyone who wants to address council on the proposed changes to the draft contained in the council packet? Seeing none, we'll close public input, and I would entertain a motion to amend consistent with the draft contained in as provided by the city attorney.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried.
Thank you, Jane.
And entertaining a motion on second passage of ordinance.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Very good. And we do not have any disposition of communications to council this week, so we'll move on to council comments. And Gloria, we'll start with you tonight.
I don't think I have any tonight.
Okay, Tim?
Go Iowa State.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Nothing for me. You might notice that we don't have our same ex officio here today, Bryce. We just want to wish him all the best in the next thing he does and thank him for his service and representing the Iowa State students the past 9 months.
Yep. Ellen?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Jacob?
Yeah, just also pass along my thanks to Bryce and had fun subbing in tonight. Hopefully by the next meeting, I think we'll have a long-term replacement for the position. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for filling in, Jacob, and your service as president of student government and a whole bunch of other different things that you
Cyride.
Cyride and Parks Recreation Commission. You've been really
Yeah,
very much invested in the city of Ames, and we appreciate your service. And also, I echo what Rachel said, and that is the appreciate Bryce's hard work as well too. So I just want to bring to council's attention and invite all council members and anyone who may be watching, listening. We do have our third community conversation on mental health this Thursday night at 6:30, and it's on resiliency. We have Lindsay Fenley will be the keynote speaker. And we have a number of individuals, both from the city and from the school district, talking about resiliency. And it's a very important topic. And I think we're trying to get the message out also to Iowa State students. I'm sure the Daily will do a phenomenal opportunity to get that out. But it's going to be held at the district headquarters offices for the school district. We're doing that on their building. They're hosting it graciously. It's going to be in the school board room, and hope that many of you can make it. It'll go from 6:30 to 8:30. Should be a great program lined up, and we hope that we can really help encourage people to build resiliency moving forward. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.